Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome back, focused learners, to another explainer. Today, we're stripping away all the noise and getting right down to the data that will completely transform how you learn. We're looking at something you probably do every single day, but we're going to look at it through the lens of applied linguistics and scientific research. We are talking about podcasts, specifically how they hold the literal formula for unlocking true language fluency. If you've ever felt stuck on a plateau with your language learning, you're definitely going to want to pay close attention to this.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, the magic of listening. Second, the scientific proof. Third, active listening strategies. Then finding your perfect level. And finally, a really cool true crime bonus. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The magic of listening.
So, if you've spent any time at all learning a language, you absolutely know the struggle of rote memorization, right? The endless flashcards, those grammar drills that just leave your brain feeling completely fried. We've all been there. You stare at a textbook and wonder why the language still sounds like a wall of noise when a native speaker actually talks. Well, an English linguistics graduate hit the nail on the head. They describe the ultimate breakthrough like this: the moment you stop translating in your head and start understanding as a flow. That's it. That is the magic moment. It's when you're no longer computing words one by one like a human dictionary, but you're just naturally absorbing the meaning. And for a lot of people, podcasts are the exact catalyst that triggers this flow state. And you know what? This magical feeling isn't just in your head. It's actually grounded in solid academic theory. Specifically, we're talking about Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis. This theory basically states that we acquire language best through exposure to comprehensible, meaningful input. Not through grueling grammar drills, but by actually listening to real language at the right level on topics we genuinely care about. So, when you're listening to a podcast about a hobby you love, your brain is doing all that heavy lifting for you in the background. Moving on to Section 2, the scientific proof. Let's look at the numbers. Now, this leads us to a massive question. Can a podcast actually replace your traditional textbook drills? Like, can you really just hit play on your phone and expect to outperform someone sitting in a classroom doing grammar worksheets all day? Well, to answer that, researchers set up a really fascinating 13-week study. They looked at 139 Iranian English as a foreign language learners. Now, these were intermediate students, and they were split into different groups. Some were given your standard, traditional textbook instruction, while the experimental groups were assigned different English learning podcasts. And over the course of 30 hours of instruction, they were tested rigorously to see what would happen. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the undeniable gap in speaking proficiency. Just look at these post-test results. Out of a maximum score of 25, the group listening to the All Ears English podcast scored a 22.2. The Coffee Break English group, they scored 21.4. But the traditional textbook control group, they lagged way behind at 15.9. The podcast listeners, the ones engaging with authentic conversational audio, absolutely crushed the control group when it came to fluency, coherence, and pronunciation. It wasn't even close. And get this, it didn't stop at speaking. Check out the vocabulary post-test results. The podcast group soared past a score of 24, while the traditional group was stuck way down at 18. This proves something incredible in linguistics called incidental vocabulary acquisition. Because the podcast groups were exposed to words in rich, meaningful contexts, their brains retain the information far better than the students who were just memorizing lists. It's literally dual coding and social cultural theories in active motion. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this. Researchers found no statistically significant difference between the different podcast series themselves. The magic isn't in some secret proprietary curriculum. The magic is in the format itself. It's that consistent, authentic exposure to spoken language that does the trick. It gives you a real-world context that a stiff, scripted textbook dialogue just cannot compete with.
All right, Section 3, Active Listening Strategies.
Okay, let's look at how this builds into actionable, everyday practice, because we really need to establish a clear boundary between passive and active listening. Look, passive listening is when you have a podcast on as background noise. Maybe you're vacuuming or commuting, and your mind is kind of wandering. And hey, that's okay for getting a feel for the rhythm of a language, but it's not going to move the needle very fast. Active listening, on the other hand, requires your full attention. It means you're taking notes, you're rewinding, and you're intentionally engaging with the audio as a serious learning tool. A highly recommended strategy from linguistics experts is something called the 3-pass method. And it goes a little something like this. Step 1. You listen to a short episode or even just a 5-minute clip without reading anything at all. Just try to grasp the general vibe and meaning. Step 2. You listen again, but this time you read along with the transcript.
This connects the spoken sounds to the written words and clears up anything you might have missed. Finally, step 3, you put the transcript away and listen one last time. Seriously, you will be absolutely amazed at how much your comprehension jumps in that third pass. It trains your ear and your vocabulary at the exact same time.
And if you want to take your speaking skills to the absolute next level, you need to use a technique called shadowing. Basically, this means you repeat what the speaker says, almost simultaneously, doing your best to match their rhythm, their pitch, and their intonation. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you here. You're probably going to feel a little silly doing this alone in your living room. But applied linguistics proves that this is hands down one of the most effective techniques out there for mastering a natural accent and just getting your mouth used to the physical gymnastics of a new language.
Which brings us to Section 4, Finding Your Perfect Level.
Now listen, none of these strategies are going to work if you pick the wrong material. Think about it. If you try to run a marathon before you can jog down the street, you're just going to get injured and quit. The exact same thing goes for comprehensible input. You have to find your perfect level. And to do that, we use the 70% comprehension rule. It is super simple. If you understand less than 70% of what you're hearing, that podcast is just too hard for you right now. Put it aside for later. If you're pausing every 5 seconds to look up a word, you lose the flow, you lose the context, and honestly, you lose your motivation.
So to save you some time, here's an expertly curated playlist to get you started today. If you're a beginner, definitely check out BBC 6-Minute English or VOA Learning English. They speak really clearly and at a measured pace. For intermediate learners, All Ears English and TED Talks are fantastic for that conversational but structured input. And if you're advanced, well, it's time to take the training wheels off. Dive into Freakonomics or NPR. Start listening to podcasts made for native speakers. Essentially, stop treating yourself like a language learner and start treating yourself like a language user.
Finally, Section 5, the True Crime Bonus.
Educational content is great and all, but let's be real. True crime podcasts are literally engineered to be addictive. Experts over at the EF Global site highly recommend shows like Serial, Sweet Bobby, The Dropout, and The Shrink Next Door. And why is that? Because the intricate plots, the psychological twists, the deep cultural context, all of it naturally forces you to pay super close attention. You get so desperate to figure out who committed the crime or how the crazy scam worked that you completely forget you're actually studying a language. It is the ultimate motivation hack.
So it's time to take true ownership of your learning journey. The research we've looked at today is completely clear. That traditional textbook plateau, it's very real. But the good news is you do not have to stay stuck there. By combining authentic audio with active engagement, stuff like the 3-pass method and shadowing, you are literally rewiring your brain for fluency. You have the tools, and they're freely available right there on your phone.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought as we wrap up this explainer. You now know the formula. You've seen the hard data. You have the exact strategies you need. So, what mystery will you solve in your target language today? Go find a podcast that fascinates you, hit play, and let the magic happen. Keep learning, keep focusing, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.